truth is when he told. I say I'm fine, yeah, I'm fine, oh, I'm fine, hey, I'm fine, but I'm not. I'm broken when it's out of control. Say it's under control, but it's not. And you know it. I don't know why it's so hard to admit it. Being honest is the only way to fix it. There's no failure to fall, there's no sin you don't already know. So let the truth be told.
Well, that is just a short summary of 2020. We welcome those who are here, welcome those who are watching online either today or whenever this is viewed in the future. I polled 100 people, and 96.7% of the people that I polled said 2020 was the best year in history. All right, I made that completely up. In 2020, most people said by April they were ready for 2021. In 2020, the year started off basically fine. There was the musings of this virus that was elsewhere and not here. Most of us were still in our normal lives. But quickly, by March 21st, that was the first weekend we were here, not open in the building, and we quickly flipped to online services. Most people were abruptly working from home, unless our faithful people that are in the medical field or essential workers. Our children all were sent home from school. Their teachers were thrown into Zoom meetings. Our older generation that lives in nursing homes, yep, that's the one, were locked in, family couldn't visit. That's just now being lifted. Some people transitioned into the life that were kind of set up to go online. Some people transitioned to that well, but for the most of us, we didn't. It was difficult. Life was hard. That was kind of the mantra of 2020. The images that you saw show up on the screen earlier, they just showed a small glimpse of what happened. 2020 goes down as a bad year. So after the whole virus thing had kind of gotten fully into focus, George Floyd was murdered by the police, sparking protests all over the U.S., many of them extremely violent. There were the murder hornets, the California fires, there were no toilet paper in Target. We all had to wear masks. The stock market took a massive dip, hurting many people financially. Many people lost their jobs or were at least sequestered, or whatever the right word there is. It's not the right word, though. In September, we found out that Daniel Prude had died here in Rochester in the custody of the Rochester Police Department, sparking a new line of protests, both locally and nationally. We're a divided nation that was dragged through a very contentious election, resulting in a new president this year. The list goes on and on and on. But 2020 was a rough one. The meme that's up there kind of sums up what 2020 really was. Every second in 2020, there's more. There's something else coming down the line. And all too often we get drawn into these things that are going on in our lives, the negative things that pull our focus. And when we focus on these things and we hone in the mantra of 2020 being a bad year, my question is, are we missing what God's doing in our everyday lives because so much is going on that's bad? Are we missing the good that is happening because everything we see is bad? Today, I'm going to take a look at the life of Joseph. Joseph in the Old Testament, son of Jacob. He went through a few things in his life. Does anybody have some things in Joseph's life that were not exactly good? I'm looking for answers here. He was sold into slavery. That's a pretty rough one.
He's lied about with the wife of the, I forgot what it was.
Potiphar's wife. Yeah. Yeah.
The guy didn't remember the dreams.
The guy in jail. Yeah. Some pretty things. Pretty bad things that happened in Joseph's life. We're going to take a look at Genesis 39, 6 through 20. And the stuff that happened before, as we kind of just talked about, Joseph was Jacob's preferred son. He was, at that point in time, the youngest. And Joseph was born of Rachel, whom Jacob loved. And his brothers were jealous. So his brothers, naturally sold him into slavery, like normal. And as devastating as that was, Joseph was bought by Potiphar. And Potiphar was a high-ranking official in Egypt. He was the captain of the guard. So Joseph, because of his internal nature, continued to do what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and doing so put blessing on his life. And Potiphar saw that there was something special about Joseph, and he made him in charge of Potiphar's entire household. Granted, he was in charge of Potiphar's household, but yet he was still a slave. So I'm going to read, that's kind of where we pick up. I'm going to read from Genesis 39, starting at verse 6. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except for the food that he ate. Now Joseph was a well-built and handsome. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph. And she said, "Come to bed with me." But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, "My master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except for you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing to sin against God?" And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even to be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story. "That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me." He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. A slave has the opportunity to sleep with probably a beautiful woman that has power, and yet he refuses time and time and time again. Which is smart of him, right? That's the right thing to do. But by doing the right thing in this situation, it gets him thrown in jail. So if you're Joseph, by this point in time, what do you think you're thinking? Why me? After all the faithfulness that I've shown to you, God, why me? This is how I'm treated? Just when things start to, I don't know if being a slave ever is considered going right, but just as things start to go right in his life, just as he finds favor with Potiphar, he's thrown into jail. Granted, he does find favor with the jail warden, but he still stays in jail at least for 2 years. We know the end of the story. We know that Joseph becomes the governor of all of Egypt and that his brothers, as he dreamed earlier in his life, we know that the end, but in this point in time, Joseph doesn't know that. All Joseph knows is that he's separated from his family, he's sold into slavery, he's thrown in jail. He even, as we mentioned a short minute ago, had a possible opportunity. He saw it. He said, "Don't forget me," because he interpreted the dream of the cupbearer for Pharaoh. He saw the opportunity to get out of jail because Pharaoh could do that. But then the cupbearer forgot. And he spent 2 years in jail. In every trial and tribulation that Joseph walked through, he kept his eyes on Jesus. He did the right thing from the beginning to the end, even when it was going to put him in a much more difficult position. When bad things happen in life, we often tend to put our focus into those. That happened in 2020 a lot. 2020 had a lot of bad things happen. There's no way to avoid that reality. So it's not that our faith in God is all of a sudden going to change that reality. The bad things in 2020 were going to happen whether we're Christians or whether we're not. If bad things are going to happen in life, and knowing Jesus doesn't change that, then what's the point here? The biggest thing that I believe that we can control is our own perceptions and our own focuses and our own motivations. When bad things happen to us, when life gives us lemons, you make lemonade. When we have tough things that happen, we can focus on those bad things, or we can focus on any pieces of that that are good and trust that God has us no matter the situations that we're in. In 2020, it seemed to me like bad kind of became our identity. We didn't feel like we could hold our head above water much of the time. In many ways, you saw it on social media, we actually bonded over everybody having terrible times in 2020. We actually had times where we could say and we could relate to other people because everybody was just going through a tough time. When we focus on the bad, the small, when we focus on the bad things that happen in our life, every little thing that happens in conjunction with that becomes magnified. So, as an example, I have a job interview, and I'm running late to said job interview. That's bad enough. But then my truck doesn't start, so I got to get out and jump it. Okay, it gets jumped. While I'm jumping it, I spilled a little bit or I got some grease on my shirt. And all of these things snowball to where you can get very upset about the circumstances you're in, but all of those things on their own don't necessarily have the same weight. So what if instead of focusing on the bad, what if we can start to focus on the positives in life? Doing this by no means is an easy step, but it's an intentional step. You have to be intentional about looking for the positives in life when things are going wrong. In all reality, sometimes there actually isn't anything that is going good at the moment. When that happens in our life, we have to hold on to the fact that God is in control. God is sovereign. God sees the beginning. God sees the end. He knows how the story is written because he is not only in this time. When Joseph was sold into slavery, he was clearly hurt. He had anger at his brothers. He was devastated by the situations that he was put into. I'm sure there were plenty of times that he felt like there was nothing good that was possibly going to come of anything happening at the moment. But instead of choosing to focus on the anger at his brothers, or the fact that he was being dragged along by a camel, or the fact that he was sold again to an Egyptian person, instead of focusing on those, he chose to do the best that he could for his master, Potiphar, for the jail guard. He chose to push through the hurt, the anger, and just do anything that he could. My dad's favorite phrase, and it's a good one, you can't do everything, but you can do something. And I think that's something that Joseph really had to have latched onto in the moment, because when you're in the situations that he was in, there's nothing else to latch onto. It feels like God's forsaken you. It seems like everything's gone wrong. And even when it starts to go right, it goes wrong again. But he kept his faith. He focused on God. He kept doing what was right. In the end, Joseph was rewarded for his obedience. In the end, he was put in charge of all of Egypt. In the end, his dream of his brothers coming and bowing down to him came true. There is good and there is bad in every day. And every day we get to choose what we're going to put our focus on and what we're going to put our energy into. Bethany Hamilton is a prodigy surfer from Hawaii. Bethany Hamilton has movies written after her. She has done all sorts of things. At 13 years old, Bethany Hamilton lost her arm in a shark attack. Not really accident. It was intentional on a shark's part. If that was me, I think that would be a pretty easy time to say, I'm done surfing when I lose my arm to a shark. God, I get your point. You've taken one limb. I think that you spared the rest of my body, so that's it. I'm good. See you later. It's not what she did. Only 26 days after the shark attack, she was back on her board, surfing in the water. Only 2 years after the attack, she was crowned a national champion, which would mean she was 15 years old. Hamilton was quoted as saying, "When tough times come my way, I definitely rely on my faith in God." And just like, "Hey God, I don't know why I lost my arm, but I'm going to trust you and know that good can come of this situation." I have to say, if that's not a Joseph statement, I don't know what is. When life gets tough, God pushes us to grow. So, for me, I'm a little bit out of shape right now. Pandemic life, right? I'm actually at the highest weight that I've ever been. Not grossly overweight, but I could stand to lose a little bit of, my pants are a little tight now. So I've actually talked about losing weight a little bit. We haven't quite started a diet yet. But losing weight, getting in shape, takes work. It takes eating healthy. It takes working out, whether that's just running or however you work out. It takes doing something. It takes effort, for the most of us, to lose weight and to get back into shape. I just started, just this past week, playing volleyball. I love playing sports to kind of sort of keep myself moving. But that's not enough all by itself. I actually mentioned a couple of weeks ago to Paula that I would really like to start doing a simple at-home crunches and push-ups and just something to start strengthening my core. And we keep talking every single week about eating healthier, and I finished like half the kids' mac and cheese for lunch today, so it's going great. But I haven't done a single sit-up or push-up yet, even though we've talked about it. Because I want that end goal. I want to be that more in shape. I want to lose the weight, get back down to my normal weight, but I don't really want to actually try to do it. I don't want to put it in my schedule. I don't want to find the time. I don't want to. The list goes on. So sometimes these bad things that are going on, we don't want them. Nobody wants bad things in your life. But when God puts these things in our life and they're pushing us to grow, to become the best person that we can be, sometimes I think that's why they're there. Bethany Hamilton, she overcame gigantic obstacles. Just to name a few, and this is not even what she said, but the fear of going back into the water, relearning how to do something that's not easy, but she was so good at, and when you lose an arm, you lose a lot of balance. So for her, that would be an immense obstacle to getting back on the surfboard. But judging by the fact that she won a national championship just 2 years after a shark attack, she put in the time. She went through the pain. I'm sure there were plenty of days that she thought, I'm done. This is awful. Why am I putting myself through the situations just so that I can get back on a surfboard? But she leaned on God, and she leaned on the people that were around her, and she succeeded at what she was doing. We all want to have that great redemption story. We all want to have the success that comes on the other side. We all want to have that stronger core, that lower weight, or fill in the blank. Oftentimes, we don't want the work that goes into the other side of that hurt obstacle. With every single hurt that Joseph faced as he went through life, every single thing that he went through, he persevered. He gave it the best that he possibly could have given. God had a plan for Joseph, and he trusted that God had a plan for him, even in the darkest days. So we can learn to embrace, we can learn to allow God to work in the difficult times, as God is using them to stretch us, to grow us, to teach us every single day as we become the person that God is making us to be. So finally, the song that I recorded for us for the video that was played over earlier, that song is called Truth Be Told. And the song is written by Matthew West. In the first verse of that song, the lyrics are this: lie number 1, you're supposed to have it all together. And then when they ask how you're doing, just smile and tell them, never better. Lie number 2, everybody's life is perfect except for yours. So keep your messes and your wounds and your secrets safe with you behind closed doors. For truth be told, the truth is rarely told. Jacob, we listen to Christian music a lot, but Jacob kind of latched onto that song, and I don't know why, but he's asked for it numerous times over the last few weeks. Probably God putting it in his heart so that I could hear it more. But that's just a great picture of who we are as people. The day of social media, and we put online what we want people to see, and we put the good stuff, not the bad stuff, and the Pinterest boards that show the perfect little thing, well, that's just a zoomed-in picture of the whole wall, and the whole wall's a mess. The false sense of what everybody else is doing in life, and we really like to pit ourselves against the other people that we know. Well, this person's got this, or this, well, that I feel bad for that person. They lost their job. Or we like to compare ourselves. But the situations that we're in are ours. Our life is ours. And when we start to compare ourselves to others, we kind of are straying from the point. In the chorus of the song, it says, hey, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine. Oh, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine, but I'm not. Have we ever put that on ourselves? Have we ever put that on any kind of social media? Or, I have been thinking this a lot, and it's like when I work at East High School, and I'm on a construction site, and we're working. Nobody's really working specifically together, but we're all working in the same spaces, all the different trades, and you walk by somebody, it's like, hey, how's it going? Good. Over the course of 2020, for the most part, the answer kind of changed a little bit from good to, okay. But nobody really had that positive. Nobody's ever like, well, life's pretty crappy right now. Granted, you're just in passing, but we don't really have that honest answer when people ask how we're doing. Sometimes when we put up that front, we don't really want people to see the hurt that is going on underneath. But if we don't ever deal with the hurt that is going on underneath, if we don't ever let that hurt happen, we will never be able to move past it. Luckily, that is one of the best attributes of the church. This is what the church is here for. The church is not a place for people who have everything all put together to come and swap manly stories about what they did this week and cutting down 7,500 trees. I don't know why I said that. That doesn't make any sense. The church is a place for the hurting. The church is a place for the sick, the sad, to have a safe place to come and be ourselves. To have a brother and a sister that you can come and you can talk to. But for that all to work, we have to be open and honest about who we are and what we're walking through in order for the church to be there for us. Our weekend services are a great place. We can come together corporately, worship God. Oftentimes it helps us feel a little bit better. But then we're going to step back out that door for the 1 hour we're here, and the world is still there. One way that I think that we can become much stronger as a church is through small groups. That's one of those places that we don't really have a lot of small groups going on. We do have a few. We have some Wednesday night stuff. We have some adult, kids, all that. Turning Point is our youth. We have places for that, but a lot of our adults are not involved in small group. And I think in the announcements you saw a video earlier on that was about small groups. But when we have the small groups, that kind of becomes your little circle of family within the church. And it becomes that place where maybe it's a little bit harder to talk in the whole congregation about places that we're walking and all that kind of stuff. But when we have that small group, it's that place that you can really come open with. And when we go through a time like March and April and April and April and April and April of 2020, you have those people that you can reach out to that are checking in on you, that can text you in the middle of the week and say, hey, how's it going? I know you had a tough time last week. We don't have a great strong base of that here, but what we did do is we started a website, not a website, but we put a page on our website for signing up for small groups. And you can go there and you can say, hey, I'm interested. We're not really going to pit people into certain things necessarily as we get this whole thing rolling. But what we will do is just now we'll know that somebody is interested in joining into some sort of a small group. We need to have small group leaders, and we can go through all the training stuff and all the pieces that fall in place. But it's just one of those things that I think will just make this church that much stronger. Our people, you guys, us, me, stronger is having that group of people to do life with. So head over to pcf.church. It's right in there in one of the main blocks right in the front of the screen, and get yourself signed up. We need some leaders. We need some people that want to join in. So my last little point that I didn't even write anything down because it happened just today is I mentioned earlier my friend Rick Benson, who was not, I don't know how old he was, but he was somewhere between 50 and 60, was shoveling snow, had a massive heart attack, and died today. And I've got another friend who I was texting with that just letting him know because we run the softball league together. And a few years back, he had a medical incident and barely made it past it. But he did make it past, and he's all healing up now. But he just kind of had this thought of like, why? Why is it that this person loses their life and I was saved? And when we get all to the bottom of all that stuff, like we say, let's focus on the pieces that are there. I know Rick was a Christian. I know that he's home with the Lord now. I know that his family's hurting. I know that his kids that are probably around my age or a little younger are going to be hurting. But we can see the positives behind that, and that can help us get through that. Even when you see the situation like my one friend who is living today but just we're not always going to understand the whys behind what happens here on earth. But we can trust that God has us. So when we're honest about our pain and when we choose to focus on Jesus and not on our sufferings, we know God uses all things to work for our good, for those that trust in him. 2020 becomes the year that while plenty of bad happened, when we can see Jesus working in every day and we can place our trust in him, then it provides that path that we can walk through to get to the next day. And to live life not waiting for Friday, but loving Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, not just for retired people, for everybody. Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, just thank you for this time to share your word, to talk about Joseph, the man that you really put in amazing situations that nobody wants to go through. But you use those situations to show the character of a man who walks with you. A man that I can see and I can say, I want to be like Joseph. I know that bad things are going to happen. I know that years are going to have struggle. I know that there's going to be pain. But I also know that you're with me. I also know that you've gone ahead of me. I also know that you have a plan for my life. So help us to take those steps. Help us to step one foot at a time. Help us to see the glimpses of truth, the glimpses of good that happen in our lives. Help us to be more like you. That's why you sent your son here to the earth. You sent him here so we'd have an example of who you are, that we can follow you. We lift all these things up in your name today. Amen. Our promise comes from